JJ Ellis, welcome to the Artisan Parlor.
Thank you for having me, David.
It's a privilege to be hosting you. I came across your profile on X a little while back. You were engaging very passionately with a lot of the, let's say, right-wing sphere within the arts society. That's one way of thinking about it. This online sort of uh, continuously growing conglomeration of all sorts of different people that are meeting. You are not the first left-wing artist I've had on the podcast, but certainly the most recent. And so for that reason, especially, I appreciate you being willing to come on. I have admittedly had a hard time finding people who were of a, let's say, uh, different political persuasion to come on and speak. So I really appreciate you being here. But before we go any further, I did want to ask you first, can you introduce yourself to the audience, tell people what it is that you do, a little bit about your background, and then we can go from there.
Sure. Hi, I'm JJ Ellis. I'm an abstract painter working out of New York. New York born and raised painter. I started as an illustrator, actually. I went to college for illustration, and I did that for many years, studied classically, all of that. We worked from old masters paintings. We painted with oils. We painted with, uh, Conti crayons and charcoal and all of that sort of thing. And then after college, I did a little bit of illustration for a while. I was out there doing spot illustrations for a good while, painting a little spot illustration of Obama's head during that time period or something like that for a newspaper article or a magazine. And then after that, I kind of lost a little bit of interest in it, honestly. I got to say, I was disenfranchised with the industry, definitely in the beginning. And I started trying to get as far away from it as possible for a good while. I got a whole bunch of jobs doing things that had nothing to do with art. I would be doing, I was in a butcher shop. I was bouncing a bar late night. I was doing bar backing. I was doing bartending. I worked at a farmer's market on weekends. I moved books for libraries in Cornell for a little while too. Everything to sort of like just get away from the art world for a little bit. And honestly, it was kind of interesting that it boomeranged back to me. I couldn't escape no matter what I did, And around 2020, when the world shut down, I was working 5 different, just like minimum wage jobs, doing every day and like completely breaking my back to get enough to eat and live in New York. And everything shut down. And I was sitting at the kitchen table one day and I was like, I think I'm going to start drawing. Actually, I think I want to I wanted to instead of having to, and I started doing abstract paintings, like immediately it just came out of me. Like I want to do this instead of do the figurative work that I grew up learning. And it immediately clicked with me in a way that like I felt like I found something, something big. And I was like, I started putting them out online and I would share them with everybody. And I initially started selling them to raise money for charity, just to like, give money to a cause. And then after a while, it was so successful that I was like, can I actually like live on this? And I started selling them for myself eventually. And just through social media, like almost entirely through Instagram. Like I would just put out a piece, somebody would see it and be like, yo, how much? And I would send it to them. And I started basing my business model off of that. And it took off in a way that I was honestly really surprised. Like it felt like people sort of wanted that sort of thing and it excited them. So I was really energized doing that. And it's been, what, 5, almost 6 years since then. And it's been really nice. I actually have worked on my craft in a way that I am like, I feel like I'm really touching on some things that actually like matter to me now. Instead of so much pomp and circumstance, I feel like I'm very blunt with the things that I'm feeling now, and it goes right into a canvas in a way that I feel is more honest than the work that I was making when I was doing illustration, even.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not a painter. I'm a musician, but I certainly relate to having to do the minimum wage jobs.
Of
You might
course.
appreciate this in 2020. I was working in a lot of different symphonies in Texas at that time. My wife was still finishing her bachelor's degree. I had just graduated,
Hmm.
so I was doing the gig life. And then when the COVID pandemic came in and just shut everything down, I moved back down to Corpus Christi to keep working, and I found a job doing deep sea commercial fishing off the coast of then Gulf of America, now, or excuse me,
Yeah,
then Gulf of
yeah, the
Mexico,
Gulf
now
of
Gulf of
America.
America
Yes,
today.
that is
Yeah, yeah. So
incredible.
I did that for yeah. So I did that for a summer.
See, I think.
What's it like?
Oh, you go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that sort of thing is really important because to make the work that you feel is important, sometimes you got to go and live a life a little bit. And I feel like deep sea fishing, that is a perfect example of something that you can put into the music, you know?
It was certainly interesting. It was hanging out with a den of thieves. I wish I was exaggerating, but it was a salty lifestyle there for a little bit. What's it like working in New York as a artist? How does that work? Making a living, working in galleries. Can you tell people just a little bit about the lifestyle of what that looks like?
Right. Well, I am actually sort of like not a gallery artist. I know many people do this, and I know that it is a industry that is sort of waning a little bit now, where there are a lot of galleries in New York that are closing because of things like high rent prices and people not going outside and doing things in the same way that they used to. And I think that that definitely has informed a little bit of my I have to do this all myself sort of attitude, where I pretty much just do it for myself through social media. And I've done one solo show in Manhattan, and I would do more maybe, but I just feel like it's more realistic for me to just do it myself. I don't have to do a lot of things through a middleman, and I think that the industry itself is somewhat predatory sometimes.
And for people who haven't checked out your profile, I did see that on Instagram you have a huge audience that you've built, something like 100,000, or yeah, about 100,000 plus
Yeah.
followers that are latching onto your work. On X, obviously not as big of a following, but I've been seeing that I've seen that you've gotten more attention recently. Um, I wanted to ask you, there was the post I had originally seen that I screenshotted. I wanted to read you the tweet that you had put out. You had said, and this was in response to an account called Massimo, and
Yeah.
the picture for people who don't know is of the rape of Proserpina by Bernini,
Hmm.
the statue of David by Michelangelo, and the veiled woman by
Oh,
Strazza. I'm
yeah.
not sure how to say that, but
Pretty
we'll
good.
go with that. And then and then the banana duct taped to the wall, which
Yep.
most people, I think, even if they're not artists, will have at least some idea of
Yeah.
what that is. Um, and you had put
By
fascists
Maurizio
like art that is.
Catalan.
Say it one more time.
By Maurizio Catalan. Four
What is
Italian
that?
artists.
Oh, okay. uh, so anyway, forgive me. The tweet you had sent out: fascists like art that is simple, literal, and usually from a time period that mirrors our current overarching fascist sentiments. They are trapped in a state of arrested development, stuck with the understanding and critical thinking of a 12-year-old. What do you mean by that?
Those are my words. I like to go on X, and I just sort of I poke around a lot. I say things that are sometimes a little bit out of pocket on purpose because I want to sort of make people think more than they are currently. Because I think with things like the comedian by Maurizio, it's just people see that and they just get angry instead of thinking about it. And I'm not talking real shit about. Oh, can I curse on here? Am I allowed to curse?
You could say whatever you want. I don't
Okay.
censor people.
All right, wonderful. I think that the sentiment now is more towards a realistic and literal like depiction of things. And don't get me wrong, I love all of those sculptures. I studied those sculptures. I drew from those sculptures for many years. I think that the understanding of them is different now, where it's just like people want to be fed something. They want to be told something, and it to be easy to digest, content, consumable, things like that. And I feel like, it's made people sort of push away from any sort of art that they might have to interact with at its own level. I think these sculptures are things that, if you think about them deeply, you can find more meaning within them than just that's a cool looking guy, But with the banana, I think that you have to interact with it in a different way than people are used to interacting with things anymore. And I think that it would actually behoove us all to sort of meet art on its level and try to like actually engage with it as art instead of as somebody who is consuming media.
On the banana,
Mm-hmm.
let's jump into that for a
Yeah,
second, because this is something that obviously I don't think it's fair to say that the banana in and of itself is the thing that people are reacting to, because people are also reacting to, as an example, Duchamp's urinal, the pissoir, as
and it
Fendevillers
hasn't changed for many
appropriately called it.
years. It's the same
Right.
things that people are getting angry at, and it's like, okay, why have we not made it past this mental block? Why is it this again? 100 years later, it's like, could we evolve past this at this point, or like gain an understanding for this thing that we call art?
Well, actually, let's go even more fundamental. In your view, what is art? Explain to me like I'm a 12-year-old.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, this is a big definition. I really just kind of feel like art is anything that you make of it. I think it is our job as people who perceive, as creatures on this earth who perceive, to allow everything to be a little bit of art. Art is anything made by a human being. You can argue that. Art is anything that you see in nature. You can argue that. I think that these discussions are really important to what makes us us, And a lot of my own art, I do look back even further to the first people who made art. I think about it like in that terms, like cave art. Things like, why are we doing this in the first place? Is it just saying like, I was here, making a statement of humanity, or just not even humanity, but existence, leaving some mark, or saying something to somebody either at the same time period or off in the future?
There is something that jumps to mind when there's a similar sentiment in music by a man named John Cage, who composes 433,
Yeah.
which you might have heard of. But
Yeah.
for anyone who's unfamiliar, this is the piece where you sit at the piano and you don't play anything for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And when John Cage was criticized for this, that this isn't music, it's devoid of the thing that makes it music, he responded with, well, everything is music. And this rings to me, and I want to get your reaction to this. This rings to me something like have you seen the movie The Incredibles?
I have.
Do you remember the character of Syndrome? Syndrome, when he captures the Incredibles, he has that line, I want to make everybody super, that way no one is super.
Right.
When we define art in this sort of large umbrella term, where art is anything we make of it, and that's a viewpoint that reads to me as something like a radical subjectivism, where because we are experiencing everything through our senses, therefore everything is subjective in the literal sense, because we are experiencing it only through our lens. Like, you can see that I have a brown jacket on, but I can't know if the brown that you see is the same brown that I see.
Right.
How then are we supposed to make sense of the world? On that, though, you seem to make a distinction between and you correct me if I get this wrong, you seem to make a distinction between art that is good and art that is not. And I'm curious about how you do that.
No, I'm not talking about art that is good. I think all art is good. I think art is good. And to expound on that syndrome statement, if everything is art, then nothing is art. I disagree with that. I think if everything is art, then everything is art. I think that by saying some art is good and some art is bad, that's where we end up in a bad place. That's how we get to these sort of fascist sentiments that I'm against. And that's, the view. Yes, I make some Twitter comments that are a little bit funny, but it's trying to make people think about things. I'm talking as if the fascists are viewing this art as this is good and this is bad, and sort of doing this throwing it back at people thing. You see it online a lot now. People like Gavin Newsom doing things like this, who I don't support. But you see this sort of like, okay, you're going to act like this. Let me meet you on your own level, and we can have a conversation in whatever words you want to find. I think I'm trying to meet people on their level, even if it's a little bit of tough love sometimes.
Sure. Let me throw you an extreme example.
Hmm.
Um, Manzoni's can of shit,
Hmm.
which is the literal name of the art piece, where
Yes.
he takes a tin can and he fills each one with a little bit of his own feces. Does this qualify in your worldview as good art?
You trying to gotcha me now. I think,
Not got. I promise it's not a gotcha.
yeah.
Just an extreme example to
Right.
see what
It
how you
is.
react
I
to it.
think it is absolutely art, and I think that all art is good art. If somebody can find a way to make something and use their time on this earth to make art, especially if it makes people think about what the definitions of things are, maybe expand somebody's worldview or make them a little bit more open-minded. Sure, even a can of shit can do that.
Okay. Um, so, is there anything that would qualify as bad art in your worldview? I mean, if I literally sat down, smashed my head against the mirror in my bathroom, and took a picture, does that qualify?
I think it qualifies as art. I think everything that people do qualifies as art. Whether people are responsive to it or not depends on kind of the artist and their audience and the people that view it. But I think that in many respects, everything that people do should be and um, can be conversed of as art. Does it get a reaction? Certainly. Is it a good reaction? Not often, but it still counts.
Do you believe that art can uplift or demoralize people?
I do, absolutely. And that is that's another factor of it. I think that um, personally, I would like to make art that uplifts people. Um, uh,
Why is that?
well, because I want people to be happy.
Okay.
I really think about this a lot when I'm painting. It is very subjective too, because you put one thing into it and maybe somebody else gets something else out of it. I I put a lot of myself into these works, and when somebody else sees them, it's sort of this alchemy where I've put something in, but they're looking at it as if it's a mirror and they're extracting something else out. And it really says more about them, what they see in an abstract work, than it does about me. It is this sort of beautiful transmogrification between one person to another.
And certainly this manifesting of abstraction in and of itself is a profound, significantly human. In fact, I would say it's one of the most human things, that instinct to create and bring into the world um, immaterial ideas to be made material. It is fascinating in that sense. Um, I was going to ask you something. Yes, you said you want to make art that makes people happy. Is it good to make art that makes people happy?
Yes, I would like people to be happy with my art, but that's just me. That has nothing to do with I actually, at the end of the day, I make the art for me, and other people being happy. When I say I want other people to be happy, I really just mean me. I make it for myself. And when other people get something from it, that makes me happy as well. I think of it as, like very much a mirror. And sometimes little bits will come through from me to the other person in this almost, sort of magical way. Like I made this painting recently and I was in the studio and I was listening to this one song over and over again while I was painting it. And I put it out and a lot of people reacted to it pretty instantly. And I had one person DM me and be like, man, I love this painting. It reminds me of this song. And it was the song that I was listening to. And it was like, okay, something is happening here. I don't know exactly what it is, but something is absolutely happening here between two people on opposite sides of the world.
You said earlier that you were developing your technique in art. I'm curious, is it a fair lens to view art not through a merely technical lens, but taking technique into account and using that to judge whether or not something is, if you don't want to say good, at the very least
Oh,
well made?
well made.
Okay.
Yeah, technical. I think, and I get this a lot too, because people are like, oh, it's just paint splatters. It's not technical in any way. I'm like, all right, you do it. Let's see. Because you can absolutely tell the difference between somebody who has gone to school and spent many years doing this thing with somebody who's just starting. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I'm saying you can absolutely see a difference in somebody who is technically trained. And I've done it for a long time. People immediately recognize that when they see the work is like, okay, this is not a brutish hand. This is a gentle touch. You know, these things take a long time. It's not done in a second. It's not done in a day. You know, these paintings, I go over them over and over again, time after time, carefully calculating each move. You know, it's kind of a little bit like, I think of it like two things. I think of it like chess, where you're kind of playing a game against an opponent, which is the painting, and sometimes that doesn't work out well. And I think the other way is you can think of it like it's jazz, you know, and it sort of is improvisational, and you're not so much fighting something as if you're trying to breathe something into existence. You know, when you start a painting, there are many people in the room with you. You've got a lot going on in your head. You're thinking about, you know, your work week. You're thinking about, you know, oh, I got to pay my mortgage. I got to do this. You know, your parents are sitting in the back of your head and they're talking to you, and all of these things are happening at once. And once you start actually getting into the flow state, they leave the room. And at some point, eventually, you too leave the room, and you're actually just having the painting be made as if it was made through you. You know, someone else does the work at the end of it.
Going back to this idea of art comparisons lead to fascist values, can you walk me through how you connect those two?
Art comparisons lead to fascist values. Oh, like
yes, the comparisons of good and bad
right.
lead to fascist values.
Yeah, I think that the devaluation of one specific type of art is very dangerous in you know, our current environment, especially, you know, because what happened first, you know, before they start getting rid of people, they started getting rid of modern art. You know, they took all of the art that they deemed lesser and they put it in a museum, and they showed everyone, this is the problem. This is what happens when you don't run a society right. And then all of a sudden, people start disappearing after that. So it's a slippery slope to a world where art is policed and people are policed.
Is there a middle ground, perhaps, where the government, let's say, in these examples of fascism, where the government says not necessarily that we're going to police art, but we're only going to fund a certain type of art.
Right.
Is that fine in your view?
Well, you know, I don't say it's fine in my view, but I think that is definitely less harmful than policing a certain type of art. And I do think that government funded art installations and the government giving money to artists is an interesting concept.
Again, and I apologize. I don't mean to keep harping on this, but I just another example popped into my head since we mentioned David's Michelangelo, or the reverse, Michelangelo's David. My son, who is 5 months as of today, actually October 23rd.
Oh, happy birthday!
Recording this. Yeah, right. Yeah, my wife wanted me to say that, and I said, you know, I'll wait till a year. That seems better. He loves to. He can't quite crawl yet, but he'll be on all fours, and we'll put objects in front of him, and he can kind of move them around. And there's not really. He's just discovering his environment, right? If I were to put a piece of paper underneath him and some paint, he'd be able to kind of smush it around and push it around. And obviously, as his father, you know, I'd look at that and I go, like, oh, you know, my son is, you know, having fun and colors. Would you? I think I know the answer, but again, I want to get your reaction to this. If I took that painting, right, and I put it next to Michelangelo's David, in your view, is there just no difference between these things other than the art mediums, or are you able to say one is created by a master, the other by an infant?
Well, I think you could definitely tell. I think you could definitely tell that somebody has practiced a technique, and you know, I think there's something to be said for that, but there's also something to be said for freedom and expression as well. You know, I spent a lot of time trying to be, you know, Michelangelo's David, and after a while, I was like, all right, there's something else I want too. You know, I do want some freedom of expression, and I looked at my old works from when I was like, you know, 4 or 5, 7 years old, drawing in a book, and I was like, there's really something there that like. It feels like, well, Picasso has this quote where it's like, it took me a long time to become a master. it took me even longer to paint like a child again, you know? And I think that's sort of beautiful to me. You know, I do want to find that thing that is almost there before we learned all of the other things, you know, that nugget of truth from the beginning of our interest in art.
Would this be like creating with imagination?
A little bit, you know. I think imagination is really the reason that we start picking up any utensil to make art in the first place. You know, okay, um, I want to see something. I want to make something. It doesn't have to be like, you know, I try to go in with no real set plan when I paint. Honestly, it's like I want to see what happens naturally. And I try to keep any ideas out of my head, honestly, when I'm doing it, because I think that the ones that are my best works are more honest and come from a place where I'm not trying so much, you know? Because when you try too much, you end up overworking it. You're thinking a little bit too much for it to be, you know, a really great, honest work. I think the less that you put into it from the academic, the more it actually comes from somewhere else.
Certainly, and I think that this is a point of just radical mutual agreement. One of the things that I've been very frustrated by with my more academic contemporary, not modern but contemporary composer friends, is that a lot of them have really given into the intellectual side of the art form, but not the experiential. I would go as far as to say beautiful side of the art form, of what it means to communicate. But on that point, I'm confused by what you mean when you say you go in to create something without an idea. If art is the manifestation of an abstraction, an idea that you're trying to communicate, how does it work to have no idea when you're going in to create something?
I mean, it's not absolutely no idea, because, you know, as much as we'd like to, we don't actually have a blank space upstairs. It's always going. There's a ton of things happening inside your head at all times. I'm trying to quiet them and go somewhere else. It's a little bit of escapism for sure. You know, I want to, make it so something happens without me really being there. It's almost a magic act. You know, I'm trying to move between these sort of ideas and these worlds by not so much going in with like, all right, it's going to be a blue painting today. You know, we're doing a blue one, and I think it's more interesting if you do it in the moment. It's very improvisational. Again, talking about jazz, I think about it like music. You know, I want to compose these works as if it's in the moment and playing jazz. And I've had many friends talk about this same thing too. With I have a lot of violinist friends who play in philharmonics, and they often talk about how it has worn on them. You know, like they do about the same academic thing, and they feel like they've lost a little bit of that soul. You know, that little bit of like, you know, where am I in the piece now? Where do I come into this? They're playing music. They play it really, really well, technically beautifully, but they feel like they've lost a little bit of that like oomph.
Yeah, at that point it becomes mechanical and you're going through the motions. I mean, certainly, especially if you're playing the same pieces over and over and over again, there can be a staleness that comes through that. Certainly, one of the reasons I enjoyed chamber music, especially, is because even when we approached a piece that we had all performed before, because it was this specific group that was getting together, three individuals getting together to play a certain piece, be that Beethoven or Brahms or Tchaikovsky or Shostakovich or whomever, it always felt like a new experience because of the people that you were with, and that helps breathe some new life into old pieces.
I think that's a fascinating thing. You know, I think having somebody else in the room changes the experience entirely. You know, you're doing orchestral work, or you're doing work with many people. You get to sort of see how you play off of them, and it's sort of it's kind of like acting or something, where you're like, you know, the most important person in the room is no longer me. It's, you know, my stage partner.
Yeah, certainly, absolutely. On this idea of improvisation, um, again, just to give you a little bit of background of where I've come from. So, my bachelor's degree was at the University of North Texas. It has a great classical program and is known for their classical program, but it's primarily known as a jazz school. It's considered to be the number one jazz university in the United States. There's been a lot of Grammy winners that have come from there. They have the 1 O'Clock Jazz Band, which is unbelievably famous. I've talked about this before. I tried to get in to see them at some point, but there was a line that stretched between two buildings, and there was just no shot of me getting in there. In my last year at North Texas, I worked with two people, Eugen Kim, who is the GA, to Scott Tixier, who is a jazz violinist. So it was a lot of jazz work, a lot of jazz strings work. One of the things that is important in jazz improvisation is that there are rules to how you improvise. And this is improvisation for any system, be that mariachi, be that classical music. That used to be a proficient skill that pianists and composers had to have in order to be considered a virtuoso pianist. Can you improvise on a theme? But it's not completely random, on the spot, never thought of this idea before. It's, can you synthesize a bunch of different ideas together that form something coherent?
Absolutely.
Is that something that plays into your type of painting?
No, that definitely rings true, and that's what I'm trying to get at, even though sort of roundabout. And when you're technically good at something, when you've studied for a long time and you're able to do something the right way, you know those rules and you're able to bend them and break them in a way that is still cohesive with the final work, you know?
On that point, and I'm curious, in your view or your perception, what is beauty?
That's a good one. Beauty, again, entirely subjective. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? Who can say what beauty is except for an individual? You know, personally, I could tell you what beauty is for me. You would tell me something different. That's what I kind of think is beautiful, is there are so many different ways to view the world. And the more that we experience, the more that we interact with others, the more that we grow and understand each other.
What do you mean when you say grow and understand if it's entirely subjective?
Well, I like to see other people's, views of the world. I think that makes me a better person by viewing the world, or trying to at least, through somebody else's eyes. You feel like you actually, okay, I never thought about it that way. That makes more sense to me. And now I'm different because of something that you said to me. I've become a different person through something that I've been taught from another person's perspective. I think that's kind of the point of this whole thing.
So with that in mind, in your view, is there such a thing as truth beyond the self?
I'd like to think so. I am honestly searching for it a lot in the work that I do, is I'm trying to find some sort of nugget of truth that holds true for all of us. I want to find something that it's just like, if I showed it to anybody, they would feel that way. It is a lifelong journey to find that nugget of truth.
Okay. So playing off that for a moment, if I'm following you correctly, and you correct me if I get any of this incorrect, through art, we can discover nuggets of truth that exists beyond the self. So we might say not merely subjective. It's subjective in the sense that we are experiencing it, but if I come across a tin can in the middle of the road and you're right next to me, you will also see that tin can, something like that. We are sharing a reality that exists beyond our own perception. And that rings to me as something that sounds a lot like objectivity.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, once you get into the weeds with this sort of thing, a lot of things can sound like other things.
Expand on that for me.
We want to talk about objectivity versus subjectivity.
In that sense, I guess the thing that confuses me, I'm tracking with you, I think, so far in how we're supposed to look at art. But when you say that you can discover truths through art, truths that exist beyond the self, that rings to me as something like, it's not merely subjective. There is actually a measurement that we can take when examining some of these things. I guess that's where I'm seeing it. That seems like a disconnect, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
I think what I'm trying to say is that these nuggets of truth, this sort of thing that we're searching for, is like, a little bit of the divine, right? Like, some sort of something beyond this life, maybe something bigger than us. And I think that's kind of what we look for a lot of the time. Maybe the reason that we started doing art in the first place, sort of searching for these things that are outside of ourselves, whether they're subjective or objective. We're not really sure a lot of the time. We're just searching, and I think that in many ways it is about that searching.
Yeah, the journey or the adventure through the search. Yeah, absolutely. Um, and forgive me, I want to. The reason I'm bringing this up, one of the class I teach at the university, Georgia State, is the music, comma society, comma and culture class. So one of the things that we do is we examine different worldviews that manifest themselves in different centuries and how that relates to the culture and how that influences the arts. So, as an example, in the 19th century, you have this beginning rise of secular humanism. This is Beethoven's era. In the Ode to Joy, he employs the help of the German poet Schiller, I think is his name. And in the translation of the original Ode to Joy, Beethoven is trying to communicate something like eternal love, but in a more materialistic sense. He doesn't say daughter of Zion or daughter of Jerusalem, which would be like a Christian interpretation. He says daughter of Elysium. And Elysium in the ancient Greek mythology is like a version of their heaven, similar to Valhalla in Norse mythology. We don't have to go down that road. But what he's trying to communicate is something like there is a truth that we are searching for, and I'm trying to find it, but I'm not sure exactly what that is. So I'm going to put forward this vision and try and bring about something like eternal brotherhood, the love of man from from one another, and this is the thing that's going to unite us and move us closer to a utopia. My question to you is: you say divine, and obviously that's going to ring all the right notes with me. What do you mean when you say divine?
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's not the perfect word for it, but whatever thing that you higher power, I guess you would say in American vocation, right? It's like anything that is beyond what we know. I think that that's what Beethoven's looking for. I think that's what we're all sort of searching for, is something that will be like, all right, this is the key, And I think in communication, I think about communication a lot, honestly, like between people, ways to best communicate something, the right words to say, the right notes to hit, these sort of things. If we can find that secret chord, I think that's sort of what we're all searching for in many ways through the art that we make, is like a better communication with other people too. It doesn't have to be, some guy on a cloud or something. It could just be, like between two people having a conversation and making sense of the world in a way that sense wasn't there before.
And obviously, of course, like yes, and yes, of course, I agree with that. Again, pushing you, since we're on the subject of philosophy, I'm curious, how do you conceptualize concepts of good and bad? Not even necessarily in art,
right? Like in the world.
When you use this language of good and bad, what is it that you mean?
Right. Well, I think that I usually don't use the language of good and bad. I use it in terms of people and their views of things. Like when I say fascists like this, or fascists think this is good, I'm talking about through a perspective, not on an overall, like this is objective sort of thing. It's more like...
Is that, forgive me, and I hate interrupting, so I apologize.
No worries.
Is the implication not that fascists are bad when you are putting this language out? I know you're not saying the sentence fascists are bad, but if you say fascists like this and it's destructive, that rings to me as a statement, fascism is bad, which obviously I would agree with, but that seems to me a moral judgment.
Well, I think the only moral judgment that I have against any people is when it gets to the point where it starts impacting other people. I think that I'm from New York, so I think I'm of the mind of, mind your business, leave well enough alone. If it's not hurting anybody, don't poo-poo somebody else's day by making their life harder. Let's not put parameters on things that people do unless it's actually harming people. And I think violence is harming people, and that's like a big no-no. So when we get to the concept of violence and people enacting violence, it's not easy to make it so black and white anymore, because it's just like, all right, well, if we're going to have a conversation and you don't think that I'm like a human being on the same level as you, we can't actually have that conversation. And I've actually gotten, through to a lot of people in a way that I feel is like, okay, that's kind of the nugget of truth every now and then, where I have somebody who's sort of on the verge of these thoughts and these feelings, and I'm like, I feel like I can pull them back from the edge by just speaking to them as if they're a person. We have, I'll have somebody come into my DMs like, you da 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 da, like I can't like stand you, and then I'll just be like, all right, well, I'll give them a little bit of therapy talk and be like, well, why do you feel like that? What about me makes you so angry that I exist? And then, after a couple of minutes, they're like, okay, I never really thought about it that way. You're not such a bad guy after all. And I'm like, all right, great. I think we just got through on a human level that is not really possible when we were just yelling at each other online, And I think I got to say, the screen thing, it really has divided us in a way that is so bad for us. It puts us further away than we've ever been. Being behind a little screen and talking to somebody else, like even this is more interactive than any conversations that we're having online. And it is still a little strange looking at you in a small square on my screen. I feel like it separates us in such a way that, honestly, I wish we could shut it all down, but I think we've gone a little too far to get there again, But to my earlier point is like, it's taken us further from ourselves and further from each other than we've ever been before. And I want to reopen those lines of communication, even if it's through this new medium, which is social media, maybe we can make that into some sort of art form too. Like, I'm going to communicate to you through this little box, and we're still going to have a human moment no matter what.
Yes, absolutely. I've joked about this with my wife many times. It is everything in me to not burn what we've built to the ground and just move to a cabin in the woods and just have land and do our own thing.
Yeah, well, I'm in the woods right
absolutely.
now.
Yes, of course,
Yeah.
and I have seen, it's funny, it's like, yes, of course, this sort of medium, absolutely. Having conversations is great. And in one sense, we only have the power of conversations to interact with each other.
Right.
We share, in this case, a common language, and we're able to communicate ideas. Yes, absolutely. And online, it's always a temptation. And I've tried to stop myself from doing this, but it's always a temptation to just, say the most lacerating thing that I would never say to somebody face to face like that, because you wouldn't, because it's not, if I look at somebody's accounts, it's not just like a random name and a random picture. If I'm interacting with somebody
it's a real person,
even through this medium,
yeah,
it's totally different. It's like, oh yeah, you're another human being.
And I do this now too, where I lacerate somebody online. I'll say something like that to get them to engage with me, and then I'm like, all right, now I got you. Now we're gonna have the real conversation. Now that I've hooked you with my little mean comment, now we're gonna talk like we're two people. And by the end of that, it gets their attention in a way that you can actually open up and be a human being again.
Yeah, and it is an effective tactic, and I have seen that. I don't necessarily have that much, I guess, fire personality to successfully pull that off. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And yet this statement of we should interact in a human way, we should connect in a way that allows for conversation to thrive, that reads to me as a statement like, it is good to want these things and it's bad to want these other things.
You just want me to say,
would you at least cross over to my side a little bit?
I will give you that. I think it is objectively good for us to have communication with each other. I think that everybody needs to be better at communicating with each other if we're going to want to get through. Not even if we want to have a good conversation, but if we want to survive, I think we need to start communicating with each other in a way that we haven't done before. And I look for that in art and in music and in everything, is just some way to communicate. This thing is like, oh my God, we have to come together or we're kind of done for in many ways. If we don't start communicating right now, it might not be a time to communicate at any point in the future. I'm a little bit urgent with the way that I make art and the way that I speak with people, because I have limited time. It's like we're on the edge of something happening, and I'm just like, no, guys, come on, like, let's get together, form some sort of consciousness, and we'll actually get through it. If we don't and we're severed, we're going to wither away, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad I can, at least for this conversation, bring you over into the, let's say, more objective rather than less subjective.
I'll give you one.
Yeah. Well, we can leave that one live for a moment. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about, because I think this is something that you and I would lock arm in arm with, wielding swords together, fighting against AI art.
Right.
Walk me through why you have been so vocal about AI art being bad, if we're going to use that language.
It is the antithesis of the conversation that I'm trying to have. It actually, if talking through screens and talking through social media was bad, that's just not talking at all. And I think we've gotten to the point where you have the entire internet at your fingers. You can learn anything that you want, but instead of going and finding out actual tidbits of information, you just go like, Gork, what does this mean? And it tells you what you want to hear, and then you don't actually learn anything. You're just given back to yourself. You're a snake that's eating its own tail. You're not learning anything, and you're actually getting worse from using it. And I've seen it in the deterioration of people's ability to communicate now. And that's like, it's kind of reaching a Tower of Babel kind of scenario now, where people, instead of talking to other people, are just not talking at all. They're talking to a machine. They're talking to themselves. And it's a little bit eerie.
How does that relate to how we interact with art? I see a lot of people taking AI generated imagery, putting that out there and monetizing that, and essentially
Crushing,
wrecking the
industries,
whatever market existed for art.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, in a world where we were not under capitalism, these sort of things would go a little easier for people. But when you're destroying entire industries that people have been working in, and going to college and studying for their entire lives to do, now all of a sudden the animation industry is gone, illustration is gone. There's no spot illustrations for things anymore. We are crushing the advertising industry. All of these things where people used to make art and then make a living enough to eat and feed themselves and sleep in a bed. Now those people have to go do something else. What are they going to do? And I think if we're going to live under capitalism, I don't think that we can have AI at the same time, because that's further siphoning the money up. Who's making anything off of this? Billionaires. Who's losing? The working class. Every one of us feels some sort of pressure because of AI, whether it's the amount of water that it takes up, the pollution that it causes, the electricity that it uses. All of these things, the burden of that falls solely on the working class's back.
Yeah, I think you and I link up on a lot of these points. Pretty obviously, as an American, and I would count myself in the right hemisphere of the art world. I'm not an anti-capitalist, certainly by any stretch of the imagination. On the other hand, though, the mass marketing of art as a business model, I think, has been almost exclusively detrimental. I don't think I'm being hyperbolic when I say that. I can't think of an upside to monetizing art in the way that a capitalist system does. I mean, in music, with apps like Spotify and Apple Music, it's just destroyed live performances, and it's destroyed because so much of it is artificial now and put through auto tune. There's no love of that which is real and actually created by human beings. It's created by machines. And I do despise that.
Yeah, those little imperfections in a person's voice, the quavering when they sing a certain way, I think those are the things that are most important, those imperfections. Because when you hear this AI music or you see AI art, you don't feel anything because it's not from a person. And if anything, AI art has proved the importance of art more than anything else in our history. Because now we know what it's like without art. That's what that looks like. And it doesn't feel very good. And, on top of that, I think that when you're talking about the industry and the way that monetizing art, I fully agree. I think that monetizing art is the worst thing that we've ever done in our lives. Still need to eat, though. If it worked without capitalism, I would love to make art all day. If I was totally taken care of, I had, food, clothing, and shelter, what would I do? I would make art all day anyway. That's where we should be. But instead, I have to make it for money. And it's like, well, now I'm touching on some evils that are necessary for life, but I don't want to. And I don't think anyone really should, in a perfect world, have to interact with those evils. I think if we're going to do this, we got to get to a place where everybody is set, and then they can make the beautiful things that they want to make with their lives.
The last question that I've been asking everybody, and I'm asking it in the original 10 episodes that I did, the ending question was, what is a positive vision for the future? And I want to keep that general theme, but in terms of practical applications, I'm also very interested in that. Usually in podcast conversations like this, people they touch on like everything that's wrong, and it's like, yes, we can all diagnose the thing, but
Yes,
how do I take the positives of this and apply this practically?
right.
So for everybody listening, what would be the practical vision that you would pitch to people that they can implement, not only from this conversation but from the things that you're doing?
Right. I think that is one of the reasons that we're in this situation now is when people are asked, what is a better future? They can't even dream an entire dream. They just tell you the things that are bad with the right now. I'm like, I want to see your vision for the next thing. And nobody really has that. And I think that that's part of why we're not getting there is we can't picture what it would be like if we were all kind of happy, kind of doing okay. And I think the vision for that future where everything is, as you say, good. I think that vision would be everybody has what they need in terms of food, clothing, and shelter. Everybody has free time to make the things that they want to make. Maybe no money. Anyway, I think another thing that might be pretty good for a future is if we actually had a planet that we could live on successfully without, getting sick and dying. So I think in terms of the future, we need to do a lot of things different. But it can be really beautiful if you picture it in your head. And you have to get there, is you have to imagine what it's going to be like when I'm there. You can have the family that you want. You can have the life that you want if we actually communicate and work together. So the future that I want to see is better communication between all people. And I think better communication with ourselves and understanding the things that we actually need and want.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're coming over to the side of the right-wing artists, focusing on truth, beauty, and goodness.
Right. Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Perhaps,
Try
the
it.
nuggets are planted, the seeds are there. Oh.
You're trying so hard, but I think what we really need to do is get away from these culture wars. Honestly, I think that's our best case scenario. If we're actually just like, I'm not right, I'm not left. Actually, we're just trying to make it work. I think the things that divide us are the real issue now. It's like I don't give a crap about any of the things that divide us. I think we should be talking about the things that make us similar, because when we get down to it, the things that make us similar, there are so many more of them than the things that divide us. And that's sort of the class consciousness that I'm trying to get to, is like, wait a second, why are we fighting about this one small issue that neither of us really, interact with that often? What if we just talk about the things that we actually share? I love art, you love art. Let's talk about that.
That's a good note to end on. No pun intended. JJ Ellis, thank you so much for coming on and speaking to me. I really enjoyed this.
This is fun.
Where can people find you? Do you have a website people can go check out? Social media pages?
Check me out. I'm on Instagram, JJ Ellis Art, and the same handle on Twitter if you want to argue with me.
Thanks so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, man.